I thought it was just an ordinary afternoon. On my desk lay stacks of quarterly reports, the numbers I'd been used to seeing for 30 years. I planned to stop by my daughter's house for dinner afterward, like any other Sunday. But then, my phone screen lit up. A message appeared from Michael, my longtime lawyer throughout my career. Call me immediately. Urgent! It's about Ida. My heart clenched. Michael had never used the word urgent when it came to family. I dialed immediately. On the other end, his voice was rapid and cold as steel. Wyatt, you need to know the truth. Your daughter has filed a lawsuit. She wants the court to declare you unfit to run Hansen Tech. That means I was speechless. It means she wants to take the company away from me. Michael paused a few seconds, then replied bluntly, exactly. And she's not alone. Ida has rallied a group of shareholders to her side. The hearing will take place in just 1 week. The room started spinning around me. I built Hansen Tech from nothing, from sleepless nights in the garage, dreaming of turning it into a legacy for my family. I once believed Ida was the rightful heir, yet now, my only daughter wants to use the law to strip it all away. Outside the glass, rain drizzled over Seattle. The city kept running as usual, but inside me, everything was falling apart. I could barely hear Michael explaining the defense strategy. Only one cold question echoed in my mind. Why would my own daughter want to destroy me? I sat motionless in my office, still gripping the phone after the call ended, as if holding a burning coal in my palm. Michael's words rang like a hammer blow. She wants you declared unfit. Ida, my only daughter. The girl who once held my hand at school science fairs, who excitedly showed off every debate win. And now she's the one suing me, dragging me before the court like a confused old man clinging to power. I stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling glass window, and looked down at rainy, misty Seattle. Every day, that scene was a source of pride, proof that Hansen Tech had achieved the impossible. But today, the city lights are blurred and meaningless. Stay calm, Wyatt, I told myself. 1 more week. I called Michael back, my voice hoarse, as if I'd just run a long distance. Do we have a chance? Yes, but slim. They've prepared thoroughly. They have documents, witnesses, even a doctor ready to testify that you showed signs of memory loss after Elna's death. Elna. The mention of my late wife made my heart tighten. If she were alive, she'd know how to stop Ida from drifting this far. Michael continued, his tone steady and cold. You have to give me everything. Medical records, health assessments, financial decisions from the past 3 years. And Wyatt, I warn you, don't confront Ida directly right now. They want you to lose your cool, so every action you take looks out of control. I agreed and hung up. But how can I face Ida tonight? We're having dinner at her place, a family tradition since Elna passed, to keep the bond alive. I drove toward Bellevue. The gray sky, drizzled rain. In my mind, a flickering chain of memories the time Ida graduated college, and I was late because of a meeting with Japanese partners. The time she cried in her room when she found out I canceled the family vacation for a deal. Those times I kept telling myself she'll understand. It's all for her future. But maybe those fragments piled up into the deep pit we're in today. The door opened. Ida stood there in a cream sweater, her face bright, a gentle smile as if the whole world was fine. She hugged me, and that hug was so perfect it felt fake. Dad's here? Sophie made a drawing for you. Little Sophie ran out, holding a crayon-filled paper showing me at my desk, and her in the swivel chair. My heart softened. Kids don't lie. But Ida's eyes as she looked at that scene, a flicker of unease, quickly hidden. Dinner was served roast chicken, mashed potatoes, red wine. Trevor, her husband, made polite small talk, but his hand trembled slightly as he poured me wine. He knows, or at least he's involved. You look tired, Dad, Ida said sweetly. Maybe you should rest more. I gave a faint smile and replied, work keeps me sharp. By the way, how's the finance department doing lately? She hesitated, then quickly changed the subject. Dinner's ready. Dad, let's not talk about work. This is family time. Family? I wanted to laugh. The very word she tramples on every day. Throughout dinner, I observed, Ida was calm, steering the conversation like a conductor. Trevor listened, nodded, adding a few compliments like a backstage player. Sophie innocently shared stories from school, the only thing keeping the atmosphere from collapsing. As I was about to get up, Ida went with me to the door. "Dad, are you really okay?" she asked, eyes wide, feigning concern. I looked at her for a long moment. That face bore Elna's features, but the eyes no longer held warmth, only cold ambition. I nodded softly. "I'm fine, but I've been thinking a lot about Hanson's future." For a moment, her expression stiffened. Then the smile returned. "Drive carefully, Dad. The roads are slippery." I turned away as the door softly clicked shut behind me. That night, I sat in my study. Yellow light casting down on piles of old files. Among them, I pulled out a wooden box letters Elna wrote before she passed. In one, she wrote, "Wyatt, you can build an empire, but if you lose Ida, everything is meaningless. Don't let her see you as just a boss. Let her see you as a father." Tears fell onto the page. Elna foresaw this tragedy, but I was blind to it. But if Ida has chosen war, I have no choice but to fight. Not to save the company, but to keep the last shred of my honor. I called Michael again. My voice was unusually calm. "Prepare the files. I won't let them turn me into a powerless man." In front of me, my father's grandfather clock kept ticking. I whispered, "All right, Ida, you want to take down your father in court? So let's see who the father and son really are." The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The 50th floor of Hanson Tower was quiet. Only the sound of the elevator and the steady Seattle rain. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and before I could take a sip of coffee, Michael called. "What? I just received a copy of Ida's lawsuit." His voice was even but icy cold. "She not only filed to have you declared incompetent, but she also secured signatures from 5 major shareholders." I gripped the phone tightly. 5 shareholders. This was no joke. "Who?" I asked briefly. "James Corbin, Patricia Wheeler, and 3 others. All promised higher returns by Ida. You can guess increased dividends, staff cuts, full AI implementation." My heart felt crushed as if weighed down by stone. All these years I upheld the philosophy sustainable growth. Employees are our greatest asset. Now my own daughter was turning those ideals into proof of my obsolescence. Michael continued, "Wyatt, she's playing this very strategically. They have records of every time you opposed mergers. Every decision where you prioritized employee welfare over short-term profits. They'll spin it into a story you're ruled by emotion, no longer clear-headed." I let out a dry laugh. This world has truly flipped upside down. I kept the company safe from countless risky deals. And now, that's the very thing used as evidence against me. "What about Ida?" I asked. "Does she have any right to do all this?" Michael was silent for a moment before saying, "She believes she's rescuing the company from you, and more importantly, from your shadow." That afternoon, I attended the internal shareholders meeting, a meeting where Ida should have been sitting beside me like she always did before. But the seat next to me was empty. Instead, Corbin sat there smugly, his eyes both avoiding mine and full of arrogance. "Hanson Tech needs a fresh breath," Corbin began, not bothering to look at me. "The market changes by the hour. Young corporations run on AI. But what about us? Still clinging to company culture, to the employee family. Profit is more important than sentiment." A few shareholders nodded in agreement. I know they were blinded by the flashy numbers Ida presented. I waited for them to finish speaking before standing up. My voice was calm, but each word weighed heavy like stone. "The employees' families have brought us a steady 12% annual growth. 94% employee retention, while the industry average is only 67%. If anyone thinks that's weak, try working in a company with nothing but cold numbers." The room fell silent, but I saw the division in their eyes. Half were still hesitant, half had already sided with my daughter. That evening, I drove to Ida's house. I knew Michael told me not to confront her directly, but I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter, the one I once held in my arms, now standing against me. The door opened. Ida was wearing a business suit, not casual clothes. Clearly, she had prepared for this meeting. Dad, why didn't you call first? She smiled, but her eyes were cold. If you had called, I probably wouldn't have opened the door. We sat in the brightly lit living room. Trevor was busy and not present. Just Ida and me, father and daughter now like two opponents. What do you hope to gain by doing this? Ida, I asked directly. This company is your whole life. It's what you built for me. No, Dad. Her voice was sharp and cold. You built it for your ego. I'm just an unwilling heir. For years I've proven my capability, but you still don't trust me. You always think you're the only one right. I was speechless. You were preparing to promote me to CEO within the next year. Did you know that? She paused briefly, but only for a second. One more year might be too late. The market won't wait. The shareholders won't wait. And neither will I. Those words cut like a knife. I looked straight into her eyes. You're repeating the mistake of every greedy person out there. You want growth by bleeding loyal people who are devoted to Hansen? She stood up, arms crossed. That's called adapting. If you can't accept it, then you should step aside. On the way home, the rain hit the car window like 1,000 needles. I lost all sense of control, only feeling an endless void. My daughter didn't just betray the company, she betrayed our father-daughter bond. Back home, I sat at the table and grabbed pen and paper. Elna's past words came back to me. Ada needs a father, not just a boss. I finally understood. My daughter was declaring war. But deeper than that, she was demanding the love I never knew how to show. But alas, I no longer have time for regrets. In just 1 week, I'll be dragged to court. I signed the series of documents Michael sent over, starting a battle that should never have happened, father versus daughter. Before going to bed, I looked in the mirror. A 62-year-old man, hair grayer than I cared to admit, eyes tired. But behind those eyes, a fire still burned. If Ida thinks I'm old and weak, she's mistaken. I didn't build Hansen Tech to be easily stolen, even if the thief shares my blood, I whispered, as a promise to Elna. This time, I will fight. Not just for the company, but for my own honor. 2 days later, Michael arranged to meet me at a small cafe in downtown Seattle. He wanted to discuss strategy, but more importantly, Ida would be there too. She wants to meet face to face, Michael said over the phone. Maybe to negotiate, maybe to feel things out. He had to stay calm. I arrived 15 minutes early, sitting by the window corner. I watched people pass by on the damp sidewalk. The black coffee in front of me was cooling down. Inside me, emotions tangled anger, pain, and a fragile memory still hoping Ida would turn back. At exactly 2:15, she walked in, charcoal gray suit, hair tightly pulled back, heels tapping on the wooden floor. No longer the girl who waited for me by the window after work. This was a businesswoman ready for battle. Dad? She nodded lightly. No intention of hugging. Thank you for coming. We sit facing each other. Michael chooses the seat in the middle, like a referee. Ada, I begin calmly. Dad just wants to ask why. She looks straight at me, not avoiding. Her eyes cold and sharp as steel. Because you refuse to change. Hansen is aging along with you. Slowly dying. I frown. We grow steadily at 12% each year. Employees are loyal, customers faithful. You call that dying? She smiles slightly, a smile I've never seen on my daughter before. You still think stability is victory, but the world out there is accelerating. Whoever slows down gets left behind. Michael interrupts. This is family versus family. She cuts in, her tone sharp as a knife. What is family, Uncle Michael? Is it last-minute canceled dinners because of meetings? Is it school performances you never show up to? I've been used to it since I was little. To you, Family is just an excuse to legitimize the company. I'm stunned. Every word feels like skin being peeled from me alive. I remember Elna once warned me Ida needs you more than contracts. I ignored it. You don't understand, I whisper. Everything you do, all your sacrifices, are for me. No! Her voice is firm. You made it all for your own shadow. Hansen Tech is your real child. And I am just a name for you to continue your career. I feel my throat tighten. For the first time, I realize in Ada's eyes, I've never been a father, just a boss. The conversation continues like an interrogation. She lists each evidence I refused to merge with the Korean corporation. I kept the costly benefits program. I made employees join the Elna's Foundation charity fund. In my eyes, that was pride. In her eyes, it was all just emotional evidence. What would you do if you took charge? I asked, voice choking. She leaned back in her chair, hands clasped, calm like a victor. Cut 20% of the staff. Automate customer service. Invest heavily in AI. And, she paused, looking straight at me, increase dividends for shareholders, meaning sacrificing employees who have devoted their whole lives to the company. It's the only way to survive. Dad's heart broke. He saw them as family. But they were just costs. I clenched my hands under the table. The person opposite me was no longer the little Ida who painted pictures for Dad, but a cold executive ready to cut all ties to reach her goal. Michael cleared his throat gently, a subtle warning. If this goes on, the court will decide, and then there's no turning back. Eda adjusted her vest, voice firm. She stood up without looking back. The sound of her heels struck the floor, fading away. I sat silently, my eyes blurring. Michael sighed. This is no longer just business. This is years of built-up resentment. I buried my head in my hands. For the first time in years, I truly felt old. Not because of age, but because my only daughter had just torn off the mask and shown me she has never forgiven me. That night, I went home and opened the safe. I took out Elna's last letters, reread every soft word Wyatt. Remember, love isn't about checks. It's about presence. I smiled bitterly. It's too late, Elna. I've lost my child. But I haven't lost the company, and I swear I won't let it take the rest of me. On the table, my father's grandfather clock kept ticking. I looked up, gazing into the mirror. In my eyes, there was not only pain but also cold indifference. If Ida wants war, then I'll show her who really taught her how to fight. That morning, the Seattle sky was as gloomy as my mood. On the courthouse steps, dozens of reporters were already there. Microphones pointed in every direction. The sound of cameras clicking nonstop. A father sues son sues father's story in the business world is always juicy for the press. Michael walked beside me, gripping a briefcase tightly. He whispered, "Don't let them find any more evidence of losing control. The courtroom door opened, and the scent of polished wood and cold air swept in. Inside, the seats for shareholders and spectators were packed. I recognized a few familiar faces. Corbin sat in the front row, his eyes eager, convinced he was about to get rich from the coup. Patricia Wheeler sat next to him, her face ice cold. Ida entered with her lawyer, Laura Blake. Laura was a name I had heard many times, a famous lawyer known for turning the courtroom into her stage. Her black hair pulled up high, sharp eyes, every step confident, as if she already held the victory. Judge Harrison, with silver hair and a stern face, struck the gavel. Laura stood up first. Her voice rang out, sweet but with a sharp edge. The death of his wife has shattered his spirit. His recent decisions have been emotional, threatening the interests of shareholders and the survival of the company. I felt all eyes turn toward me. A few shareholders nodded quietly, as if her words confirmed what they wanted to believe. Laura raised a thick file. These are the irrational expenses, funding a charity in his late wife's name instead of focusing on maximizing profits. Here are shareholder testimonies that he refused to merge, missing the chance to double the company's value. Every word she spoke felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I wanted to stand up and protest, but Michael placed his hand on my shoulder, signaling me to be quiet. And finally, Laura lowered her voice as if about to reveal a secret. It is your own daughter, Mrs. Ida Hanson Miller, who is forced to step up to protect the company from this collapse. Ada took the witness stand. The judge asked procedural questions, and she raised her hand to swear in. Her voice was chillingly calm. He decided to rely on emotions, not data. He clung to the past, refusing to change. If this continues, Hanson Tech will become a zombie in the tech industry. I looked at my daughter, the little girl who once called me a hero, now describing me as a senile old man in front of the whole world. Michael stood up to object on a few points, but Laura was too experienced. She made all his efforts pointless. She even sneered, and when I answered correctly, she pressed further. Then why did you choose to keep employee benefit programs instead of reinvesting to increase dividends? The courtroom buzzed with whispers, "Métis." I knew I'd just been turned into the kind but weak old man. During the break, I stepped out into the hallway. Cameras flashed immediately. Reporters shouted, "Are you really incompetent, like they say? Do you think you should step down to save face?" I clenched my fists, my heart aching as if being squeezed, so much that Michael had to pull me away, whispering, "Don't give them what they want." The afternoon session continued. This time, a psychologist was called to testify. He had never examined me but dared to stand there and speculate. I snorted, but no one heard. In their eyes, I was just a case waiting to be labeled. When the judge announced the trial would be postponed until next week, I left the courthouse feeling defeated. The crowd of reporters cheered as if Ida had already won in the first round. I looked around, saw Corbin smiling smugly, saw a few old employees shaking their heads in disappointment, but the greatest pain didn't come from them. It came from Ida. I saw my daughter standing next to Laura Blake, just leaving the courtroom. She didn't look at me at all. She just held Trevor's hand, head held high like someone who'd just fulfilled a sacred duty. That night, I went home and sat alone in the dark study. On the desk, my father's old mantel clock kept ticking, reminding me that time waits for no one. I pulled out an old photo, me, Elna, and Ida, when we were just 10 years old. We stood in front of Hansen Tech's first building, smiles bright on our faces. I remember saying then, "One day, you'll be the leader here." Now, those words haunt me. I whispered into the void, "Ida, you chose to make your own father a public joke." But you wouldn't expect I still have some cards left to play. In the mirror, my eyes were cold and sharp. I had hit rock bottom of humiliation, and from that bottom, there was only one path: counterattack. I thought I was used to betrayal, but after the first trial, hearing my own daughter swear I was a senile old man, my heart went so empty it no longer hurt. I sat for hours in the dark office, the Seattle lights outside sparkling like knives stabbing into my memories. Then Michael called. "Wyatt, don't just sit there waiting to die. I just got some things that could change the game." We met in his office on the 20th floor of Columbia Center. The conference table was covered with documents, color-printed emails, financial statements. Michael nodded toward the pile of papers. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "First, we found 3 suspicious financial transactions over the last 6 months. He slid a stack of bank statements toward me. A total of $847,000 moved from the company account to 3 subsidiary accounts. No approval from the board of directors. I flipped through each page, eyes glued to the numbers. The dates matched the time when Eda started her campaign to persuade the shareholders. She used company funds to finance her scheme. Michael nodded. "The law calls that unauthorized use of shareholder assets, or if we can prove it, she won't just lose the case, she could face criminal charges." I sighed, feeling both pained and cold. I couldn't believe the child I once held in my arms was now involved in embezzlement. Michael wasn't finished. He turned on the projector, and an old newspaper article appeared on the screen. The headline caught my eye: "Attorney Laura Blake, suspended temporarily for unethical conduct in the Parker inheritance case." She was suspended by the Bar Association for 6 months. Now she's back, but that stain remains. I furrowed my brow. "Are you sure this can hold up in court?" "We have more than enough." Michael pulled a USB from the drawer. "An IT employee at Hansen Tower, loyal to you, sent me security camera recordings. There's footage of Blake coaching Ida on how to answer questions, how to emphasize certain words, even how to fake choking up when mentioning her mother." I was stunned. That perfect performance I witnessed in court was just a scripted act. I walked to the window, looking down at the river of cars flowing under the rainy sky. Inside, I felt both bitter and relieved. Finally, I had something to fight back with, but at what cost? Exposing Ida publicly would be like cutting the already rotten father-daughter bond myself. "Hyatt," Michael said behind me, You have to choose. Protect the company, or protect the illusion that she's still the little girl she once was. I clenched my fists. I won't let Hansen Tech fall into the hands of a liar. That afternoon, Steve Wilson, co-founder and longtime friend, came to my office. He brought a thick file with him. I heard about the trial. I can't stay on the sidelines anymore. I was surprised. Steve, you're still on my side. He set the file down on the table, his voice firm. I've been tracking the internal emails. Ida promised a 20% raise for engineers, 30% for managers, plus stock options. It sounds good, but it's all just empty numbers. Shareholders are blinded by profits, employees blinded by salaries, but no one's figured out where the money is coming from. I flipped through each page, seeing only emails from Ida sent to the management team. They were all filled with unrealistic promises. This is fraud. Exactly. Steve nodded. If we present this correctly, the court will see this is a deliberate scheme, not just concern for the company as he claims. Late at night, after Steve had left, I sat alone in the office. On the desk were 3 stacks of files. 1. Illegal transactions, $847,000. 2. The bad precedent set by lawyer Laura Blake. Sir. The emails filled with unreasonable promises. I held a photo of Ida at 8 years old, hair tied in pigtails, clutching a math competition trophy. She once shone like the sun. I whispered, "Why did you choose this path, my child?" But then I took a deep breath. That question no longer mattered. What mattered was, I would not let Hansen Tech fall, even if it meant sacrificing the little fatherly bond left. The next day, in a strategy meeting with Michael and Steve, I placed my hand on the stacks of files. It's time to fight back. Michael smiled for the first time in weeks. I'll submit the embezzlement evidence to the court and file a complaint with the Bar Association against Blake. Steve added, I'll persuade some neutral shareholders. Once they see Ida's impossible promises, they'll have to turn back. I nodded. Good. We're not just defending. Now we're attacking. Inside me, the pain remained. But underneath was something stronger, the will to survive. That night, returning home, I stood by the window watching the rain fall. The orange clock still ticked steadily. I knew the day of reckoning was coming. I whispered softly, as if sending a message to Elna in the afterlife. I lost my daughter, but I will not lose the legacy we built together. The following days passed in a completely different rhythm. No more leadership meetings filled with flashing cameras and harsh accusations. Instead, there were closed rooms, thick files, and whispered phone calls stretching into midnight. Michael turned his office into a command center. The walls were covered with charts. On the left were the evidence Ida and Laura Blake were using against me. On the right were new documents we collected, bank statements, emails promising bonuses, and especially a recording of Blake instructing Ida on how to cry at the right moment. This is the chessboard, Michael said, pointing to the red and blue sections. They control public opinion, but we have strong pieces. We just need to make the right move at the right time, and everything will turn around. Steve sat at the corner of the table, lighting an unlit cigar, tapping his fingers evenly on the silver lighter. But if we strike too early, they'll deny everything. Too late, and the shareholders will have already voted. We have to think hour by hour. During the day, I keep working as if nothing is happening. Employees greet me in the hallways. Some look worried, others pitying. I nod, and keep a calm appearance, fully aware that every action is being watched. Every glance could become testimony in court. At night, when the city sleeps, the three of us sit together, me, Michael, and Steve. The desk lamp shines down on scattered but weighty documents. I have contacted 3 independent doctors, Michael reported. They will conduct a comprehensive evaluation, neurological, psychological, and physical. The results will confirm you are fully sane. No one can label you incompetent anymore. I nodded. Good. And witnesses, Steve opened a file. Patricia from accounting is ready to testify. She will say that Ida forced the accounting department to create fake profit reports to convince shareholders. Also, David, head of the technical department, he will testify that Ida promised a 30% raise if he supported her, despite no budget for it. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. This was no longer just a lawsuit. This was a complete dissection of the truth about my daughter. One late evening, Michael handed me a brown envelope. This is a recording from an internal camera. Listen. I played the file. Laura Blake's voice came through clearly. Ida, when mentioning your mother, pause for 3 seconds. Take a deep breath, so your voice sounds shaky. The judge will believe you're truly in pain. And when talking about your father, remember to use words like stubborn, emotional. Emphasize them at least 3 times. Then Ida's voice, calm and without hesitation, I understand. I will do exactly that. I dropped the headphones, my hand trembling, not from surprise, but from bitterness. My daughter now belonged to a scripted act, completely without sincerity. How are we going to release this? I asked. Michael replied, hand it directly to the judge, along with financial evidence. But all at once, we need to shock them right in the middle of the trial so they can't react. On Thursday, Steve and I had a private meeting with Corbin, who had fully sided with Ida. We chose a small restaurant, no reporters, no recording devices. Corbin sat down, his tone superior. Wyatt, you should quietly step aside. Ada has a new vision. And you know how it is. I didn't argue. I just pushed a file toward him. Inside were emails promising unreasonable bonuses, signed electronically by Ida. Corbin read them, his face turning pale. This could destroy her reputation. Not could. I looked him straight in the eye. It definitely will. The question is, do you want to go down with the ship or come back to us? Corbin was silent for a long moment, then closed the file. I'll think about it. As he stood up, Steve smiled softly. A big fish just got shaken. The days of preparation reminded me of my early career. No more noisy negotiations, just me, a few loyal associates, and the belief that the truth would ultimately win. The night before the next trial, I sat alone in my office. On the table was a family photo, me, Elna, and Ida at 15, beaming beside her new bike. I gently stroked my daughter's face, whispering, Dad still loves you, Ida. But I won't let you destroy everything. The grandfather clock ticked, a familiar rhythm. This time, that sound wasn't just a memory, it was the drumbeat signaling a battle ready to begin. The next morning, as I entered the courthouse, I no longer felt the shame I did the first time. I wasn't here to take it lying down. I was here to expose the truth. Michael whispered in my ear, Today, we let the mask fall. I nodded slightly. The courtroom door closed behind us. And I knew all the silent preparation over the past days would decide the fate not only of Hansen Tech, but of my entire family. The courtroom was much more crowded than the opening session. Shareholders, press, former employees packed the room. They didn't just want to hear the verdict, they wanted to witness a family drama unravel. I entered alongside Michael. On the plaintiff's bench, Ida sat next to Laura Blake. My daughter wore a dark blue suit, her face calm, but her eyes quickly avoiding mine. Laura was different. She stared straight ahead, a faint, defiant smile on her lips. Judge Harrison struck the gavel. We will continue the Hansen case. Plaintiff's counsel, please proceed. Laura stood and once again delivered the familiar script. I'm weak, emotional, haunted by the past. But this time, my heart didn't flinch. I quietly observed like a hunter waiting for her prey to step into the trap. When it was time for the defense, Michael stood, his voice calm and clear. Your Honor, my client is not only competent, but has been sabotaged through fraudulent means. The room buzzed. Ida snapped her head up, eyes flashing with worry. Michael pulled a thick file from his briefcase and handed it to the court clerk. Here is proof of 3 unauthorized transfers totaling $847,000 from company funds into accounts controlled by Mrs. Ida Hansen Miller. The murmurs erupted like a disturbed beehive. I saw Corbin frown. While Patricia Wheeler turned to discuss something with the person next to her, Laura jumped up. Objection! These documents haven't been verified. They have, Michael interrupted coldly. The bank confirmed their validity. And please note, Your Honor, the amount matches the legal fees and shareholder campaign costs the plaintiff carried out. Judge Harrison frowned. Mark it on the record. Continue. Michael nodded slightly, then turned on the projector screen. A recording played, chillingly clear Laura Blake's voice. Ida, when mentioning your mother, pause for 3 seconds. Let your voice tremble. They will believe it. And remember, call him stubborn. Emotional, at least 3 times. Ida's voice, I understand. I will do exactly that. The room fell silent. The only sounds were reporters tapping their pens and my pounding heart. Ida looked down, her face pale. Laura still tried to stand tall, but I saw her hand trembling slightly. This is witness coaching, a serious ethical violation, Michael concluded. We have submitted the original to the Bar Association. When I was called to the witness stand, I no longer felt nervous. I looked straight at the judge, then at the crowd. I founded Hansen Tech in 1995 with a $50,000 bank loan. Over 30 years, the company has grown steadily profitable, now worth hundreds of millions. Every decision, right or wrong, is my responsibility. I don't deny that I've been work-focused and at times neglected my family. But losing capacity, I paused and looked toward Ida. No, I am clearer-headed than ever. Michael raised 3 independent medical reports confirming my mental and psychological health is completely normal. Laura tried to push back, pressing, Mr. Hansen, is it true you lost your temper during the meeting about the Anderson deal? I objected because they planned to swallow the company up at a bargain price. If firmly defending employee and shareholder interests counts as losing my temper, then I accept that. Scattered applause came from the audience seats. Auditifs, ganchitipes. The judge struck his gavel to remind order, but I knew the tide had turned. In the afternoon, Michael called Corbin up to testify and confront. He stumbled when Michael presented an email in which Ida promised a 20% raise to the engineers. Mr. Corbin? Michael asked, his voice sharp as a knife. Are you aware that even after automating the entire system, Hansen Tech still didn't have the budget for those promises? Corbin swallowed hard. I was assured that... By whom? Michael interrupted. By Ida Hansen Miller. Isn't that right? The room was thick with tension. Corbin bowed his head, whispering, Yes. The courtroom erupted. When the trial ended in chaos, I stood up and left the witness stand. Ida remained seated, eyes red and hands clenched white. She was no longer the young, promising CEO. Before me was just a girl watching her whole world collapse. Outside, the rain had stopped. Reporters ran after me, shouting, Mr. Hansen, what did you think about your own daughter being accused of fraud? I stopped, looked straight into the camera. I believe the truth always comes out in the end, and the truth, no matter how painful, is better than lies. I kept walking, without looking back. That night, in the empty office, I sat with Michael and Steve. On the table was the pile of evidence that had been released, next to a draft counter-lawsuit accusing Ida of embezzlement and deceiving shareholders. Michael asked, Wyatt, how far do you want to take this? If we file this, Ida will have no way out. She could lose everything. I was silent for a long time. On the wall, a photo of Elna smiling gently. A haunting question stirred inside me, is this justice? Or just another destruction of a family? I closed my eyes, whispering, I didn't start this war, but I will finish it. The news broke less than 24 hours after the trial. Front page of the Seattle Times. Ida Hansen Miller, accused of embezzling $847,000 Hansen Tech takeover campaign, on the brink of collapse. Social media flooded with comments. Some were shocked, others gleeful. But the common thread, Ida's image, the young modern heir, was shattered. The wildly spreading emails promising unreasonable raises turned her into a symbol of blind greed. In my office, the phone kept ringing non-stop. Shareholders who once turned their backs were now calling, their voices anxious and apologetic. "Ed, I think we've been deceived." Patricia Wheeler admitted, "I don't want to be involved in any fraud. I'm going to withdraw my signature from the petition supporting Ida." Corbin, who once sat in the front row mocking me, lowered his voice. "Maybe I was too hasty." "Let's reconsider. I'm neither blaming nor celebrating," I replied coldly. "Your decision will be remembered." Meanwhile, Laura Blake was summoned for an emergency hearing by the Bar Association. The recording of witness coaching was a fatal blow. The press dredged up her past suspension, turning Blake into a script lawyer instead of a legal warrior. Ida was left alone. I learned this from an inside source. Her secondary legal team began withdrawing, unwilling to have their careers buried with their client. Trevor, her husband, called me at midnight, his tired voice, "Dad, Ida isn't eating or sleeping. She's locked herself inside all day." "Son, I don't know what else to do." I was silent, feeling both sorrow and coldness inside. My daughter planted the seed of betrayal, and now she's reaping the consequences. The next trial took place in a completely different atmosphere. Reporters no longer swarmed me, but focused their cameras on Ida. She entered the courtroom looking haggard, dark circles under her eyes. A gaunt face. The expensive suit couldn't hide the trembling in her every step. Laura Blake was no longer present. Instead, a young, nervous, and insecure lawyer stood in for Ida. Michael took full advantage. He addressed the court. "The plaintiff has lost all credibility due to embezzlement and fraud. Moreover, we have over 30 employees ready to testify that they were lured with empty promises." Several witnesses were called. Patricia, from accounting, clearly described how Ida pressured her to alter profit reports. David, from the technical department, confirmed that Ida promised a 30% raise if he sided with her. Judge Harrison listened, his expression growing increasingly stern. The judge hammered, "The trial will continue with additional evidence." But the court noted serious signs of fraud and breach of trust. Outside, public opinion shifted. Articles that once praised Ida now unanimously changed tone, from promising heir to betrayer of shareholder trust. Did Hansen Tech escape a family conspiracy? Company employees were also whispering throughout the hallways. A veteran engineer came up to me, bluntly saying, "Mr. Hansen, we know you made mistakes with the family, but when it comes to work, you have never betrayed us. Now we understand who truly cares about this company." I nodded, my throat tightening. It turned out, amid this storm of betrayal, I still had people who trusted me. Ada began losing control. In a leaked recording from an internal meeting, she was yelling at Trevor, accusing him of not supporting her strongly enough. The recording went viral, further shattering the image of the strong female leader. One night, I received a brief text message, "Dad, can we talk?" I read it but didn't reply. Not yet, the battle wasn't over. Steve entered my office, carrying a new analysis. "Good news, the neutral shareholders have come back. Support for you now far exceeds Ida's side. Bad news, she still has some minor shareholders who might cause trouble in the final session." I looked at the whiteboard where Michael had marked each shareholder's name in red and green. Green now dominated, but I knew just one slip, and my daughter could turn pity into a legitimate excuse. I took a deep breath. Then we have to end this once and for all. Not just to win, but so no one can ever doubt my honor again. The night before the decisive trial, I opened the wooden box holding Elna's letters again. There was one letter I had never finished reading. She wrote Wyatt, "If one day Ida turns against you, remember her roots are still a longing for love. Don't see her only as an enemy. She's still your daughter." I folded the letter, my heart in turmoil. Tomorrow, I will have to make the final move. But in doing so, will I be left with anything but a company and an empty heart? The antique clock kept ticking. I whispered, Elna, give me strength. Tomorrow is Judgment Day. The courtroom was packed on that fateful morning. The Seattle sky was gray, with misty rain blowing sideways like a curtain shielding the final battle. I entered with Michael and Steve, cold inside but with sharp eyes. This was no longer a battle for the company. This was a verdict of honor. Ida was already seated, wearing a neat gray suit, but her face was pale. She didn't have Laura Blake by her side. The lawyer was busy struggling with the Bar Association hearing. Instead, there was a young face, clearly pushed into an unwilling role. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. We will continue the trial. Lawyer Reed, do you have any additional evidence? Michael stood up, voice firm. Your Honor, today we will prove not only Mr. Hansen's soundness of mind, but also expose the entire scheme to seize the company through fraud. He turned on the projector. On the screen appeared a comparison chart, Hansen Tech's actual profits over the past 3 years, steady and stable, versus the forecasts Ida sent to shareholders. Her numbers painted a picture of 25% profit growth, along with promises of huge raises for employees. Michael pressed the question, can the plaintiff explain where the money came from to pay for these raises? The young lawyer stammered. Ida clenched her hands, silent. Your Honor, Michael continued, because there was no legitimate source of funds, the plaintiff took $847,000 from the company account to pay legal fees and sway shareholders. This was embezzlement. He handed the original bank statement to the clerk. The room buzzed. I glanced at Ida. She was pale, her eyes glistening with tears she tried to hold back. Then it was my turn to take the stand. Michael asked solemnly, Mr. Hansen, are you mentally competent to run Hansen Tech? I looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I have undergone 3 independent medical examinations. All confirmed I am completely healthy, both mentally and physically. For 30 years, I built Hansen from a small garage into a company worth hundreds of millions. I have never given up. And today, I stand here to protect it from outsiders and from my own blood. I stopped, my eyes fixed on Ida. She hung her head, avoiding my gaze. Michael had one more move. He played the recording a second time. This time, an internal leaked conversation, Ida's voice. Just promise. We'll find a way to fix this later. The important thing is for them to sign now. The whole room erupted. Several shareholders jumped up, stunned, looking at each other. Michael concluded, this is no longer a family dispute. This is a scheme to defraud the shareholders. The plaintiff not only failed to prove his father was incompetent, but also proved himself unfit to hold any position. The young lawyer struggled to stand Ida up on the witness stand. She trembled as she spoke. I just want to save the company. My daughter, she's always been held back. I looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see an opponent, but a desperate girl trying to cling to the sea of evidence. But the truth left no room for mercy. Judge Harrison struck the gavel hard. Enough! The room fell completely silent as the judge declared, there is no basis to claim Mr. Wyatt Hansen is incompetent. On the contrary, there is serious evidence of embezzlement and fraud from the plaintiff's side. The court will forward the case to the prosecutor for review. The gavel struck down. A chapter ended. Ida collapsed into her chair, her shoulders shaking. Trevor hurried to support her, but she pushed him away. Reporters jostled. Camera flashes popped. But I just stood silently. There was no joy of victory inside me, only a growing emptiness. Outside, the sun suddenly broke through the clouds. Reporters pressed forward, asking sharply, Mr. Hansen, how do you feel, having just defeated your own daughter? Do you think your father-daughter relationship can still be saved? I paused, looking straight into the camera. I didn't defeat anyone. I just let the truth be seen. Then I walked away, leaving behind the questions, the lights, and the trembling shadow of my daughter. That night, in the Hansen Tower office, I sat alone, outside. Seattle glittered with lights, reflecting on Union Lake, On the desk was an old photo, me, Elna, and little Ida, smiling wide. I placed my hand on the photo, whispering, "Elna, I have protected our company. But as for the family, I don't know if I can save it anymore." The grandfather clock kept ticking, signaling a new chapter about to begin. But how that chapter will be written, I can't be sure. All I know is today, in court, the mask fell. And the truth? Harsh Bear delivered a fatal blow. The next day, when I stepped into Hanson Tower, the atmosphere was completely different. Eyes that used to look away now lifted, looking at me with respect. Employees nodded greetings, some even smiled softly. They knew I had won, not just in court, but in defending the very soul of the company. In the 30th floor conference room, the board sat in rows. Corbin, Wheeler, those who once sided with Ida, were now silent. Steve began, "Yesterday, the court made things clear. Today, we have to decide the next step." I stood up. Without a microphone, my voice echoed throughout the room. Hanson Tech is more than just a corporation. It's a community of thousands of people. For 30 years, we've faced financial crises and fierce competition, but we've never betrayed our employees. I will keep that promise. The room went silent. Then a few knocks on the table showed agreement. I knew I had regained their trust. That afternoon, as I was about to leave the office, I received a message from Trevor Dad. "Ida wants to meet, just the two of us." I hesitated for a long time, then agreed. We met at Lake Union Park, where Elna used to like to take Ida for walks as a child. The late afternoon sun cast a pale golden light, the lake reflecting the last rays of day. Ida stood waiting, no longer in a sharp suit, just a simple sweater. When I approached, he spoke hoarsely. "I'm sorry." "Oh, true." I stayed silent. "I thought if I proved I was better than you, you'd see me. I thought if I could prove I'm better than you, you'd see me. But I was wrong. I only made everything fall apart." I looked at my daughter, for the first time seeing she was no longer an opponent, no longer the plaintiff, but just the little girl who once stood by the window waiting for her dad to come home. I spoke slowly. I was wrong. I put work above family for too long. I thought building an empire was a way to show love. But he wasn't there when you needed him. Her eyes were red. I just wanted to be recognized. I stepped over and put my hand on her shoulder. "You've always deserved it. It's just that Dad didn't know how to say it." She started crying. For the first time in years, Ida cried on my shoulder like the little girl she once was. A few weeks later, at Hanson Tech headquarters, I called all the staff together. On stage, I announced the decision. Hanson Tech is entering a new chapter. I'm still CEO, but I won't be ruling alone. Ada, my daughter, will join the executive board as Chief Innovation Officer. The room buzzed. Some were surprised. Some smiled. I continued, "She made mistakes, but who hasn't? What matters is what we learn. I believe Ada can bring fresh energy, as long as she holds true to Hanson's values, people before profit." Ada stepped up, voice trembling but sincere. "I was wrong to try the shortcut with empty promises, but today I want to start over, together with all of you." Applause broke out, at first sparse, then grew louder. That evening, at dinner, Sophie climbed into my lap, holding out a new drawing. This time, it wasn't just me and her in the office. The picture showed 3 people, me, Ida, and Sophie sitting at a big desk with the Hanson Tech logo above. "This is the superhero team," Sophie said innocently. "Mom, Grandpa, and me working together to save the company." I laughed, tears welling up in my eyes. Deep down, I knew maybe Elna was smiling somewhere, watching her family heal. Late at night, I was alone in the study. On the desk was a photo of Elna. I raised my glass softly. I've reclaimed my honor. Elna, but more importantly, I've found my daughter again. Maybe it's not too late to start over. The grandfather clock ticked steadily. This time, that sound was no longer the battle alarm, but the heartbeat of a new beginning. I leaned back in my chair, smiling softly. I was no longer the man made a public laughingstock by his own daughter. I was a father, a founder, someone who stood firm, and now someone who had reclaimed his family from the ashes of betrayal. I whispered, I have regained my honor. But more than that, I have regained my trust. The house was quiet. After months of storms, I could finally sit in my study without feeling the weight of darkness. The soft golden desk lamplight fell over the closed files. The court had ruled. The shareholders had decided. The staff had understood. And I, Wyatt Hansen, was still running Hansen Tech. But this victory was unlike any other in my life. It didn't bring joy, but something deeper awakening. I leaned back in my chair, looking at Elna's photo on the desk. Her gentle smile seemed to ask, Wyatt, have you finally learned? This battle left many wounds on me. The company almost lost. Honor almost shattered. And the deepest pain I had to watch my daughter stand in court, brandishing accusations like knives against her own father. I felt the full depth of humiliation, the pitying eyes of strangers, the whispers that I was old, confused, and it was time to be replaced. I thought I was falling apart, but at that moment, I understood no one can take your honor unless you let it go. I chose to stand firm, not to hold the CEO seat, but to preserve the soul of a lifetime, something I built with sweat, tears, and sacrifice. The day the court ruled against Ida, the press exploded. My daughter slumped in her chair, the world turning its back on her. That was the most bitter moment of my life, because I knew, even in victory, I had lost a piece of my heart. But then, in the days that followed, I received a surprise Ida asked to meet privately. We sat by Lake Union, where Elna used to take her for walks. Ada confessed, I just wanted you to see me. All those ambitions were really just to find your approval. I was stunned. It turns out that beneath the cold armor of an ambitious businesswoman is still the little girl who once longed for her father's love. I let work consume too many years, and when I finally looked back, there was a deep gulf of misunderstanding between me and my daughter. But this time, I didn't miss the chance. I took her hand and said, You've always deserved it. I just didn't know how to say it. She burst into tears, and I understood the real victory wasn't in court, but in the moment I won my daughter back. A few weeks later, I announced to all the staff Ida would join the executive team as Director of Innovation. The room buzzed with whispers, but I stood firm. I didn't want my daughter to always be the loser. I wanted her to learn how to build, not destroy. Ada stood beside me, voice trembling but sincere. I was wrong to think I could save the company with empty promises. Today, I want to start over. With everyone. Applause broke out. First sparse, then thunderous. I knew from that moment Hansen Tech had entered a new chapter, where past and future coexist. That night, Sophie, my niece, drew a new picture. On the paper were 3 people, me, Ida, and her, sitting around a big table, with the scribbled words, Hansen Super Team. I laughed, tears streaming down. A child can see what we adults blindly overlooked family. In the end, is the foundation. I reclaimed the company, I reclaimed my honor. But most importantly, I reclaimed a chance to start again with my daughter. If Elna were still alive, she probably wouldn't praise me for winning in court. She would just quietly nod when she saw me holding my daughter close. And I believe, somewhere, she's smiling. On that weekend night, I sat again in my study, writing a few lines of notes. I wasn't writing for shareholders, nor for the court, but for myself. And perhaps for anyone hearing this story, money can build a company. Power can sustain an empire. But only love can hold a family together. Don't wait until everything falls apart to realize this. Honor doesn't lie in the wealth we possess, but in whether we dare to face the truth and make amends. I folded the page and placed it in the wooden box along with Elna's old letters. The little orange clock beside me still ticked away. But now, each tick was no longer the alarm of a battle, but the heartbeat of hope. This journey has taught me a bitter but valuable lesson. I can win hundreds of business deals out there, but if I lose within my own home, nothing else really matters. I can carry the weight of an entire corporation, but if I don't hear the silent cries of my daughter, then I'm a failure as a father. But thanks to this journey, I realized it's never too late to reclaim your family. Now Hansen Tech has stabilized again. Ada and I work like partners, sometimes disagreeing, sometimes arguing fiercely, but no longer enemies. We've learned to share power, to say sorry and thank you, and above all, every night. I still come home to eat dinner with Sophie and listen to my granddaughter's laughter. That is the greatest reward of my life. If you're listening to this story, maybe you're carrying a family wound too. It might be betrayal, silence, or just a gap that's never been filled. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I want to say this: be brave enough to face it. Don't let others decide your honor. Don't let work steal your family away. And never think it's too late to start over. Wyatt Hansen almost lost everything, but in the end, I won back what matters most: honor and family. My story ends here, but each of our journeys continues. If you see yourself in this story, leave a comment. If you believe justice and love can go hand in hand, hit subscribe to follow more stories ahead. And don't forget, share this story, because maybe someone out there needs to hear it too.